Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the iWorkinSport live interview. This is the show where we talk to accomplished sport business professionals who come here to share their knowledge, their experience, tips, and advice in order to help you succeed in your career. My name is João Frigerio. I'm the founder of iWorkinSport. If you don't know iWorkinSport, we're a platform that connects talent and recruiters, especially, but not only, through a series of events, while we also promote career growth and education, always in sport. Check us out on iWorkinSport.com. I should actually show the link here below. I will show you right after this. By the way, in terms of, I mentioned events, we have a new event coming up. It's the Education Virtual Expo. It's going to be back, the third edition, on the 6th to the 8th of April. Registrations are open. It's free. We have new programs already confirmed. So even if you already went to the past ones and met many of the programs that were there, you might want to come back. As I said, it's free, so don't miss the chance, and hope to see you there. Anyway, thank you for being with us today. You know the drill. If you're coming back, it would be really cool if you send your messages, send your comments, your questions. You can start telling us where you're watching this from. Normally we have a very, very international crowd. So yeah, don't be shy. This should be interactive. Normally the best questions come from you and not from me. So I'm hoping to see your participation there. I will also ask you, of course, if you can, hit that like button. If you're watching on YouTube, will help us grow the channel. If you like that kind of content, subscribe. Don't forget to do that. And also, if you're connecting because you're waiting for the drop of the PlayStation 5 that we're going to give away, stick around. Enjoy the show, enjoy the interview. I have a very special guest. You'll learn a lot from him. And then towards the end of the show, the interview, we'll do that draw. So stick around. Actually, let me already take the opportunity to introduce my guest today. So Nick Meacham. Let me just go to the video here. Yes, so Nick Meacham is the managing director of SportsPro Media. So one of the most important publications about the business of sports in the world. His brilliant career in sports. He's been with SportsPro for over 10 years, but he's done some interesting stuff before that. He's going to share that with us. Not many people will have more information about anything related to sports and media than him. You can trust me on that. We're going to talk about new trends in media rights, fan engagement, big investments in sport, and much more. So let me invite Nick in just after this. Nick, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, good to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for being here with us, for being part of it. So actually, let me just go quickly here to check out some comments. Some people saying hi. So, Erica, right here. Hello, Erica Otacílio from Brazil. Philip, Mike. It's a really awesome initiative. Thank you, Philip. Gergely from Hungary. Regina, hello, and Yuri from Brazil. Let us know where you're watching from. That's great. So Nick, we have an international audience. People are, as they come in, please let us know where you're watching from. Would like you to start, maybe give us a quick, before we jump into the business of sports, and some cool advice that you can give to anyone that wants to start a career in sport. Let us know a bit about yourself, about your career. How did you start working in sport?
Sure. So, I mean, I'm Australian born and raised, and grew up in a very sort of sporting world and sporting environment where, in Australia, if you're Australian, you basically live and breathe it. So, for me, the natural progression was to always find a career in the sports world, and also even from as early stages as with my mum, who also worked in the media space, the sports and media world was part of my life right from the beginning. And really, to kick things off, I studied a degree, a Bachelor of Business in Sports Management and Event Management, which was my first step into studying and getting into the space. And then took roles with a major sporting destination in Australia, which hosted some of the biggest golf and tennis events in Australia. And then from there, also worked in publishing for a while before making the trek over to London about, it's nearly 12 years ago now. Wow. And from then came over, was looking for opportunities, really struggled actually to get a start over in London, partially because of my visa, which was only a 2-year one at the time. I found it difficult to get a start. And once I got in the door with the media business, not long later, I was approached by the then organisers who ran SportsPro, and sort of saw the opportunity to join them, which was that perfect balance of media and sports coming together for me, and took the job. And that was so nearly 11 years ago now, and I've been here ever since, and started in the sales team and sort of worked my way up to managing director, commercial director, and then managing director. And I've been managing director for about 7 or 8 years, I think, off the top of my head. So that's in a quick 30 seconds or so.
No, that's great. I don't know if we met already 10 years ago, but it was a long time ago. I can attest, been doing a brilliant job at SportsPro. Been to several of your events as well. We're going to talk about that. Talk more maybe about your involvement in volleyball.
Yeah, sure. So again, in Australia, particularly at school level, I played and trained quite a lot, and was an okay player, represented regional and so forth, but sort of fell out of the game after high school. And when I came over to the UK and London, and was thinking about what else I could do to just basically keep active, I started to take up volleyball again after 10 years out of the game. And one thing led to another, and all of a sudden I found myself playing, semi-seriously, getting qualifications for coaching, playing for the best part of 8 or 9 years with one of the main teams in London. And from there moved into, started focusing on work and also family life. And then more recently I've taken a role, now nearly 2 years on, as non-exec director of British Volleyball, which is responsible for the management of the elite pathways across Britain. So I guess you could say I've had a lot of different touch points within the volleyball world, not only Britain, but also, I guess, originally from Australia. So it's been a big part of my life for a long time now.
Well, since you've been involved in volleyball for such a long time, I'm quite interested in knowing from you your thoughts of this CVC sort of acquisition, almost like a volleyball. They're a big investment, I think $300 million dollars announced in the new venture with FIVB.
Yeah, I mean, obviously everyone across the volleyball community and maybe even the sports industry got very excited when they saw the announcement for two reasons. One, it was CVC, who has got such a great pedigree in their previous ownership of Formula One, and also more recently where they've been investing into rugby. But also the number that's associated. When you see the number 300 million in a press release and in a news story, you get quite excited about what that could do for a sport. So, a lot of excitement around it. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what does develop from that, from the sense that I get from what I've looked into it and who I've spoken with. Look, CVC is a private equity business who will be looking to drive commercial returns. So they're going to be looking at how they professionalize and commercialize the game. So I expect to see a lot of investment into the highest levels of the sport, whether it's through indoor or through beach volleyball. And they've also said, the FIVB at its recent World Congress also said that they're really going to be pushing for funding to filter down into the national federations. Now, we don't know what that means, but I think if they can follow that message, and they do follow through with investing into national federations, and I guess have both a top-down and bottom-up effect in trying to grow the game, then yeah, it can potentially be a huge moment for the sport. Now, the 300 million number, which has been presented by them, I'm sure isn't just the cash that's been put on the table. It will be to do with guarantees of revenues around the deal, and a part of that would be the investment that will go into growing the sport. But nonetheless, with CVC's backing, I'm pretty excited about what that could mean for volleyball, as at the very least as a professional sports offering, and how that's going to develop over the next 5 years or so.
So essentially, what does that mean sort of exactly? They putting sort of a pile of cash and having the right to then monetize and make money with FIVB events like their World Championships and tours, or World Volleyball. Is that?
So I would this is all predictions more than not definitely knowing, but I would predict they'd invest in a few key areas. One will be content production, so creating a lot more content to tell the story of volleyball, and that's not just the live sport. That is everything off the court. So profiling and building the stories of the athletes, the biggest names in the sports sport, to heighten their profiles, and with that heighten the sports profile. Additionally, I think they'll look to reinvent and reconfigure sports calendar. So you'll see a different shape of what the world tours look like and the Grand Prix events that they're running. And also expect to see, I would say, some big moves in what they do from a broadcasting perspective. Now, volleyball for a while now has been running its own OTT platform and streaming platform. I would expect to see more reliance on that, because volleyball isn't a tier 1 sport. So naturally, you're going to see they're going to have to lean on their own channels to develop audience and monetize that through broadcasting as well. So I also think what you'll probably see, because of, we saw, in the UK, we often talk about, and I was talking about it recently today with someone, and that was the success of events, the hosting of major events in cities and arenas. And like in London 2012, where we had, in the centre of London, we had beach volleyball, huge stadiums built up right at Horse Guards Parade, one of the most iconic destinations in London. And I would expect to see a big shift into that destinations approach by the FIVB to try and win, and CVC to try and win, go out to tender effectively with a lot of cities to try and get them bidding for the rights to host some of their major events, and really put on a spectacle, an entertainment product that's going to drive, commercialization and audiences, both in real person and also live.
Do you see this? Do you think this is the way forward for many other federations?
Look, it is a big investment and a big commitment. You have to be in it for the long term. Some sports have got the framework to have that entertainment edge that you can build a real spectacle around. It's not for everyone. We've seen other sports where there has been a lot of money put on the table or announced that they're investing into it. We haven't really seen huge transformation, but I do feel with someone like CVC behind it that they kind of know what needs to get done and have a proven track record of that to ramp up, I guess, excitement, interest, and potentially investment into the sport from those other stakeholders that I mentioned. So look, the 300 million number also will potentially even get other partners excited. So sponsors will be looking to, well, what does that mean for the sport? Can I jump on board and be part of the new journey for volleyball? So yeah, it's going to be hard to see, interesting to see what happens.
Great. Before we go to the next one, just a shout out to Audrey from Belgium, saying hi from Belgium. Philippe says that he's in Trinidad and Tobago. Juan says hi from Bogota in Colombia. You have some opportunities to work there. We're going to talk about that, Juan, about opportunities with SportsPro for sure. Jesus Lorenzo in Rennes, France. and Sean in Marseille. And then we also have Daniel in Colombia. Thank you so much. Before we go to that first question about opportunities at SportsPro, before we talk about opportunities there, let's talk a bit more about SportsPro. So if there's someone that is watching us and that is not really familiar with the company and with the business, give us a sense of that in a nutshell.
Yeah, sure. So I would say SportsPro effectively is a media and events business covering the business side of sports. So we don't talk about what happens off the field through all of our publications and through our events. We talk about what's happening off it. So we'll cover the major deals announcements like the CVC deal we just talked about. We'll talk about what's happening on the TV rights perspective. We also talk about digital transformation and innovation and technology. So all the exciting stuff is what we try and focus on, more about the innovation on what's driving the business of sports. And we do that through a quarterly magazine. We do it through a website producing over 10 stories a day, through insights through all those channels, through conferences where we, in a non-pandemic typical year, we ran 9 events in 5 countries in 2019. So we have very much a global sort of reach there. And now we're also running a lot of virtual content and conferences as well, which have been super successful. I think last year we had something like, I think the number collectively was like 20,000 people watched our content through different virtual conferences across the period. So, yeah, basically content's our game, so to speak. We're talking about what's happening in the industry every day and trying to help people navigate, how to do their jobs better, how to see what the next big trend is across the industry. And that's not just UK, that is very much a global audience. 75% of our audience is outside of the UK, even though we are a UK-based business.
Cool. You mentioned the events. You do have another event coming up in a short time, right? The SportsPro Live.
Yes, the SportsPro Live. We just officially launched that online this week. That is our flagship one where we do try and tackle all the key, biggest topics and biggest trends in the industry. So we'll talk a lot about digital transformation. We'll talk about sustainability, the use of data to monetization around that, and a few other different areas. But that's our kind of our bigger flagship event. I think last year we had about 3,500 people attend that online, which was quite exciting. I think something like 112 countries were represented in the audience there. And so that's at the end of April. We also have, within that, we're running our first hackathon, which has got a couple of dozen teams involved with that from various educational institutions across the globe, which we're quite excited about. And I think content-wise, we'll have something like 80, 90 speakers probably involved with the content as well there. Actually, also this week, we've got an event also on the US market, specifically around OTT, where we'll have speakers like the CEO of Fubo TV, we'll have ESPN, NBC, PGA Tour, all the sort of big brands and names, the NFL, and so on, that will be involved with that event. But specifically for that one, we're talking about OTT, broadcasting, and streaming, and so on.
Cool. How does one attend the SportsPro Live? Just to buy a ticket, they go to your website and...
It's all free to attend the content side of things anyway. So you can just go to either sportspromedia.com and you'll see links to those events on there. Otherwise, you can look up SportsPro OTT USA for the event next week, or SportsPro Live for the event at the end of April. So yeah, it's all free to attend online. Particularly
what about the hackathon?
The hackathon, I think we're opening that to access for people to attend as well. That's going to be happening over the weekend in the build up to the event. So each of our events typically run over 2 or 3 days.
Right. And to address now the question here that came, who was that? Forgot, from Juan, David Oval, asking if you have opportunities to work there. Answer that, but before, let me know, what is SportsPro like as an employer? Before actually you say that, you answer to that, so I'd like to say that whenever I talk to students, I highly recommend that profile of company. So SportsPro, I started my career at the now sort of defunct SportCal, now Global Data, but the brand doesn't exist anymore, or Sport Business, that kind of company, because you're normally sort of small company, but you work with everyone in the industry, and because you do a lot of research and you work with news and you get so much information and you get so many contacts, it's probably like the best school, the best springboard really for a career in sport, one of the great alternatives. Now, having said that, please let me know in particular SportsPro, how is that as an employer, and do you have opportunities?
Well, so I think in terms of what you described, I mean, when I first started, particularly running the company and talking to people to join, that was the message that I would say. Like, look, you may the end goal for you might be wanting to be a CEO of a major club or a league or a team, and like that's the dream of a lot of people. But if you want to get a real education and you want to create a great networking base and you want to really understand the nuances of an industry, then if you work for a media company like SportsPro's, you'll just get the best knowledge possible of everything and anything there is to do with the industry. I mean, it's our jobs to know everything that is going on, whether it's around sponsorship or broadcasting and so on. We kind of know who's doing it, know who to speak to. We're sort of ahead of what's going on across the industry. The education side of things is really second to none. So I would agree, whether it's SportsPro or any other business that sits in that sort of, effectively, I say you sit within the center of the industry because you are touching upon so many different parts of it. The education aspects are pretty incredible, and the impact you can have as well, because you are connecting and you're working with so many people. You're helping the industry get better, I think, from working in a media business like ours. So absolutely. And in terms of whether there's opportunities, look, we are hiring for people at the moment. I mean, particularly what this pandemic has taught us, that it doesn't matter where people are based. People can work from wherever. It doesn't matter whether it's in London or overseas. So the main thing we look for is for good people that can add value to the business. So look, there is opportunity.
So what's the profile or skills that you mostly look for when hiring?
Look, very simple stuff like, communication. And that doesn't mean you have to be super articulate at, speaking English or so forth per se. It's about, can you converse well? Can you hold yourself well in conversation? Do you listen when people are talking to you and react and take in what people are saying? Can you write a good email? Like, those basic fundamentals are actually the things that I look for, because if you can have a really strong base and you're a good communicator, if you come into any business, I feel very confident that you can get up to speed very quickly with a lot of other skills. Now, granted, in some businesses and ours, we'll look for specializations, but as a typical rule, I'm just looking for good people that you can have a really good conversation with, and they can hold their own in any environment. And that's a great starting point for me.
Cool. And in general, Nick, since you follow the industry as a whole, what are, I think, the most sought after skills at the moment by the industry?
Yeah, I think if I was to narrow it down to kind of one, it would be looking and using and understanding data. Like, everyone I talk to is, how do you monetize it? How do you understand it? How do you look into trends, whether it's consumption trends, whether it's financial trends? If you either have the basic, really strong skills at using either data analysis software or even Excel, or you can interpret it really well. You don't have to be like a data geek. You just need to be really switched on and how understanding what that can mean to a business and to decision making. That's really, I think, a super skill. If people understand and recognize and appreciate what data can tell, that is probably the most sought after skill right now, I would say. Because look, if you look at sports at a macro level, there's some big chunks of money coming in different buckets. Like, you've got the tier one sports make a lot of TV rights. You've got some of the main sports making money off sponsorship, but there's a lot of under commercialized areas and a lot of areas of growth and opportunity. So they need great people to work out where those gaps are and how to tackle that. So data and analysis would be a huge skill. Even if you're not into data, I would recommend anyone picking that up and learning that aspect.
Cool. Well, normally sales, commercial, anything that's directly generates revenue is always very much welcome as well. Probably with a big how do you call that, variable compensation. So
Yeah, I mean,
slow
look,
salary.
sales is what drives is commercialization. Sales is what drives businesses. So if you are good at sales, then you can find a job and you can provide a lot of value to a business. But that is only one part of the pie. Like there is, you need all the other aspects working together to make sure your business is successful. You can't just rely on good salespeople, because you will fall short in the long run.
100%. Nick, we actually have a question from Sean here, who would like you to share a bit more about your story, and then what do you think made the difference to land your first job in London? You mentioned that you had a rough start. So
yeah, sure. I think that for me, it was quite challenging to even get a foot in the door, and it could have been because something simple, could have been my CV, it could have been the fact that I was Australian, that I was clear about the visa situation. It could have been a lot of different things. And so one thing I say, like, people like to talk about quality and quantity. You have to reach out to a lot of people to try and see if you can get your foot in the door, but you do have to make it feel like it's not a mass reach out, because if it feels like a mass reach out, then you might be one as a person who's hiring people, you feel like that email could be 1 to 100 or 1,000. So you have to make sure that whenever you're reaching out to people that you want to work for, that you are not tailored. It doesn't have to be tailored, but it has to be just that you are making it feel like it's not a message and a reach out that is just the same thing that's been sent out to 100 potential, 100 potential employers. That's definitely a key thing for me. And to land your first job, my advice to anyone who wants to get in the sports industry, and I hear different angles on this. Like, if you talk to someone who is a major employer of a big company, they will tell you, go get skills outside of sport and then come in, because they're really, really valued. I actually disagree. I think it's good for the employers, because they want great skills coming into their business. But I think you just get to start how you can. Like, find the company that works in the industry that you can learn from, and you can get started. Again, perhaps build a bit of a network. Just get your feet into the industry at whatever level, and then either try and build from that business or look for your next opportunity if it's not the right one. But get a start, because it can be very difficult to find the perfect company right from the start. And I think just getting a start is everything in this industry, which is so competitive. It's so competitive for talent that it's very hard to stand out.
cool. Let me continue from there and ask you. So, what would you advise to someone that is entering the sports industry, or I think any career, but in sports per se, and they dream maybe to work at certain companies? Some people say FIFA or UEFA, the IOC. Those are the most quoted by students when you talk to them. Would you recommend that they would try to go to these places at whatever position, even if it doesn't really fit with them, because then you would have a foot in the door? Or would you maybe recommend that they actually, if they have the possibility to do, the role that they're good at, that they really dig, whether it's marketing, sales, communications, somewhere else, and then try to perhaps move there? Would you advise to go more for the skills or more for the place?
It's a really good question. I think it's a balancing act. It does depend on the situation. I would, if you know that you definitely want to work for someone, like, let's say it's the IOC, then get your foot in the door, no matter what level, just get in. If you want to work for let's say you want to work for a football club or a football team, again, just get your foot in the door. But if you can't get your foot in the door, because there is a very limited window, like there's not endless opportunities to get that foot in the door, then find a company that will give you some skills that they might value, whether it's looking at, potentially you could even look at some of the middle management who have potentially come from different backgrounds to understand where they've come from. So maybe you can see a bit of a path to get into that organization. So I think it's you go for either. Like, I don't think you can really say one, because if you put all your eggs in one basket there and you get shot down without even getting a start, let's say the ISE is an example, or a football club, then where do you go from there? So I think you've got to have both plans in motion. And look, the the worst thing could be you get offers at both, and then you've got to work out which one you take from there.
Great. Thanks, Nick. Listen, I have loads of questions here still, but questions are coming from the audience, and they are good questions actually. So I want to bring them up. So Daniel, I think he's in Colombia, if I'm correct, says, Nick, so after COVID, is growth expected in the industry? How do you think the industry will behave in the reactivation? Or maybe I think growth is expected, but so what level, at what pace?
Yeah, I think it's a simple question, but also very complicated, because there is lots of different. When I talk to people about sports, particularly when we're talking business, I try to emphasize that sports isn't just one industry. It's actually made up and constituted a whole variety of different industries. So you've got to look at each one on its own to understand what's happening in those sectors. So, for example, in like the digital space, more content, more opportunities with new platforms coming to the market, proliferation of OTT, social media's role. Look, there's huge growth and needs and demands for that sector, because that is really everything for people to connect with sports these days. That's only going to continue to grow, even when sports becomes more available as a live events, physical event product. The virtual and the digital world will still be as important as it is today, I think. In terms of other things like the physical events, I think what you'll see initially, and I've seen some data from companies like Two Circles that have talked about this, and they've called it, they dubbed it I can't remember the name, like the great bounce back or the great return. I can't remember the name of it, but basically they're predicting that once we do get back to like a fully fledged, doors are open, we're good to go, so to speak, we will see everyone wanting to experience live again. So you will see live events being full. There'll be so many events to access because everyone will want to be running them again, that there's going to be so much consumption on that front. So initially, I think you'll see a massive bump, somewhat offsetting what has happened, not the whole way, but somewhat. But 5 years from now, the challenge, and I hear this constantly from the industry, is actually, if you look back 5 years ago, sports was number one as a content proposition. Live sports was always the pinnacle. Now we're fighting with Netflix and OTT platforms. We're fighting with social media and gaming, and we're fighting with esports and all sorts of other channels to compete with. So content consumption, sports doesn't stand on its own anymore as that number one product like it used to. Still is in a lot of aspects, but it doesn't have the same positioning that it quite did before. So I think you are going to see growth in different ways. I think you're going to see sports working out how it navigates this huge shift to people consuming and being entertained by things other than sport, which before we didn't have to worry about. And where else? I think in terms of other markets like sponsorship will create new digital assets to play with and to monetize, but the traditional ones will struggle, I think, compared to what they used to, particularly beneath the tier one properties. I think when we talk about the industry's position, we always talk about the big guys, the Premier Leagues, the NFLs, but all of the other sports underneath that have a much bigger challenge ahead to adapt.
Yeah, definitely. Again, I'll get to some of my questions, but some are coming that's pretty much following your line of thought as well. So, Audrey here, do you think that OTT will completely replace the traditional broadcasters in sport?
Well, the thing is,
first, let's explain what sort of OTT is.
Sure. I mean, literally, it stands for over the top, which in very technical terms is basically the mobile transmission. So basically, the transmission of content to mobile devices. So effectively, what we've seen, I mean, OTT is now, and we do it as well, just use it as a catch-all term for basically digital broadcasting. But basically, you're going to see the traditional broadcasters are already adapting now to this and have always been ready to move. The reason they haven't moved sooner is because it hasn't paid financially to do it, because the premiums on pay TV were still so strong, advertising revenues were still so strong. But now really in 2021, you are seeing the big guys now making big moves. So the biggest one I tell anyone who asks, like, who's the one to watch? I mean, Amazon's obviously was the one to watch, particularly last year with some of the major investments. But this year for me is Discovery, because they've launched their global product. There's lots of rumors. I've heard big moves expected in the UK, in Australia, potentially in the US as well, which is obviously their home. So I expect to see some of those big guys going big on sports. But what they're doing is they're creating OTT-led products now. Well, they've still always had their traditional offering there, at least for the foreseeable future, but they're always having that extension that will go into OTT. And you're just going to see more and more blending of those two worlds together. In the US, it's really interesting. You see the bigger broadcasters create different branded OTT products. So NBC with Peacock, HBO Max, Disney with Disney Plus, and so on. In the UK and Europe, you don't quite see that as much. You see Sky has its own, although it does have a subsidiary business. So lots of movement, but the big broadcasters, ultimately, there's too much money on the line. They will evolve as the industry evolves, and as consumer behavior evolves. They'll be there buying the rights and sort of keeping, I guess, consolidating the industry back together again after what now is a huge state of fragmentation of, OTT platforms everywhere. Where do you watch your sport? A lot of people don't really know where to go. The broadcasters will bring it back together soon.
But what about the commercialization model of those rights? Are they changing as well, or they're going the traditional one that we know, that's where broadcasters would just go and pay and then show on their channel? And they could monetize it via sponsorship or advertising if it's a free-to-air, or by subscription if it's cable. Now you have sort of OTT or internet or other ways to monetize that. But what we're seeing is there going to be a big change in how those rights are sold, or is only the players, the buyers, that are changing? So instead of the BBC, instead of Sky Sports, then it's Amazon, Facebook, Google. How do you see that?
Yeah, it's again a really good question. There's a few different aspects to that. One, you're seeing already the deal is changing. So it used to be used to see a lot of exclusive deals at a premium. So a major broadcaster would buy basically the exclusive rights in any given region or market. Then they could do what they want with it. The fan would have to come to them to consume it, and they would try and monetize it through subscription or through advertising. That's the traditional model and always has been. Now that's the exclusive model is almost completely gone, because even the exclusive deals, an example of an exclusive deal would be the PGA Tour did an exclusive deal with Discovery for their global media rights, the first of its kind. There's some nuances to it, but generally it's exclusive. But they sub-license in markets where they see more value to other broadcasters. So even Discovery acts as a rights agency selling on the rights in certain markets to maximize their revenue opportunities. So the model's changing dramatically. The monetization will be more of a mixed blend. You're going to see OTT for direct to consumer. So let's say the big guys like an NFL. The NFL has had its OTT platform for a long time now. It's well established. The value and the amount of revenue it's generating is going up rapidly. It is still only an incremental part of the bigger piece of their revenue, but it is growing. The opportunity now is for things like you can partner with some of the major social platforms. So Facebook is a great example of this. Facebook will do partnerships with various rights holders to say, look, publish your non-premium content, maybe highlights, maybe clips, maybe archive stuff, and we'll wrap around that advertising opportunities to help you monetize that content. So Facebook doesn't just become an audience platform, it actually becomes a monetization solution. So what you'll see in simple terms, if the spreadsheet 10 years ago in the TV rights team was a handful of lines of exclusive deals, now that's amplified by 10, 20, 100-fold of where those different revenue streams are coming into the pot. And that's going to continue to diversify. We even saw a deal as recently as I think it was last week, where the UFC did a commercial deal with TikTok, where it looks like the framework is TikTok is giving them some sort of payment to create content on TikTok's platform. So again, there's a whole raft of these subsidiary incremental deals that are just helping build out the broadcasting opportunity to monetize their content.
Yeah, well, that's great. There's a few more sort of comments sort of arriving. A shout out here to Mamet from Santos. She loves my shirts, but that's my mom, Nick. So from Brazil, and more family watching as well. But Richard is not. He would like to attend the next job fair. Stay tuned. That's going to be on the 21st of May, online, digital. So here, what we'll guess. There's a couple of questions here. Oh, it's an interesting one here. Chinedu, you're from Nigeria. So what would you say, Nick, is the best single factor hampering the growth of sports in the third world nations or in developing nations, especially in Africa?
It's a interesting question. I would say there's probably.
May I just complete here that I know, sorry, I thought it was a comment about FIBA in Africa, but it's not. So go on.
Okay. No, look, I think that is one of those marketplaces where there is huge opportunity, and I know a lot of rights holders and broadcasters alike are looking at what opportunity that is and how they tackle it. It's the question is about how much revenue, in terms of pure business terms, how much revenue can be generated from that audience base. So, and I think your average revenue per user in sort of third world countries and African countries and so forth will be just so much lower than some of those more Western markets where it might be a similar amount of investment might need to go into creating content, which they can create more money from. So I think once the pathways are open for that, I don't know, sometimes things like networking connectivity can play a big part for us. So for example, for broadcasters who are now looking into OTT as a primary channel, well, if they don't have the ability to make sure that there's OTT, there's a broadcast quality access and the internet connection, simple things like that can have an impact on how sports is consumed. And if sports' main way of generating revenue is through the consumption of it, then that could be a real factor as well. So it could be simple things like telecommunications connectivity can be a huge part of how quickly major broadcasters and other players go into certain markets. I know that major broadcasters who rolled out OTT products over the last 5 to 10 years, like a DAZN, for example, that's the sort of thing they analyze. They'll look at, okay, how strong is the connectivity there? Because what we don't want to do is launch an OTT product and then it doesn't work, right? Yeah. So as soon as that connectivity is improved, then I think you'll see an influx of those sort of global broadcasters trying to take a bigger piece of the audience there.
Yeah, 100% agree. There is here's the comments about FIBA that I wanted to say. Alex Diaz, our partner here, says today FIBA announced a partnership with Twitch and Budweiser in Brazil, and will broadcast the NBA through its own social media platforms. How do you see that?
I haven't read into that story just yet in preparation for this session, of course. But look, I think those sort of relationships are really great to see when you can bring effectively a sponsorship partner right from the start, because that can kind of underwrite the whole product. A lot of these initiatives typically the monetization comes later, but if they can bring a sponsor on board from the beginning, hopefully that helps bring in some extra revenues to FIBA to run some of these initiatives. Twitch as a platform is obviously really, really exciting. The engagement levels are insane. The average consumer is watching something like an hour and a half of content per day on the platform. So if they're on, they love it. It is a gaming-led platform, but they've recently launched a dedicated sports offering. And so a lot of sports are quite excited about the ability to connect with those really super engaged audiences it has. So I do think if you can get that connectivity right and the content can fit what fans are after, then creating something that is published on Twitch, I think, is a good move.
Great. We talked before how, companies may be struggling and the models are changing in terms of commercializing social media rights, and that has a lot to do with consumption behavior of sports fans that are changing drastically. It's hard to find someone now that watches 90 minutes of a football game. So what can sports right holders do to keep fans engaged?
Well, the main thing I'd say what they are trying to do now is to gamify the viewing experience. So there's literally adding things like, for example, well, in the US, the clear one that gamifies, which is a separate discussion to be had on this altogether, is the betting side. Like, what we're actually seeing now is betting being integrated into the broadcast product. So it's not like you put on a bet and then come back and watch it. You can bet live whilst you're watching on the same platform you're watching on. And you're going to see that proliferated across the whole US marketplace, because they're only at the beginning points for that. We've done recent content talking about the US marketplace on our website, and it's crazy the amount of money coming in, the amount of investment that broadcasters and rights holders and betting agencies putting a huge. Gamification, also things like fan-controlled sports. There's the fan-controlled Football League, which recently launched in the US. Basically, they are, again, that's been broadcast on Twitch. I think the numbers I saw published were about 700,000 viewers watched the first games via the Twitch channel. 250,000 people, there was 250,000 votes made on what plays were played by the players in real time. So the fans are having a real tangible role in not only the outcome but the play, and I think things like that. Now they're gimmicky and they're not suitable in the short term. You can't just plug that into the major leagues. But the gamification side is really where a lot of people are seeing massive increases in engagement levels and watch times as a result of that.
Oh, that's great. So touching on these 2 points that you raised, this gamification of some sports, what do you think about that, Martin? Do you think it makes sense for sports that are made for that, or do you think that the fan involvement, actually participating in the game and deciding a play, or if a player will have a boost or something, do they work with traditional sports, or they should stay away from it? This is novelty that works with new things.
Look, I think it'll work down the line to add those sort of, let's call them gamification gimmicks, for whatever you want to call it, into the broadcast experience. It's very hard to transfer traditional sports into that gamified world if you're actually going to make it part of the on-screen or the live product. But I do think the gamification elements of the live broadcast will become more and more important. And gamification can also be things like vote on your favorite play in the first quarter and vote for your man of the match and other things where you can get points from your participation, and you might get prizes as a result, and you get the data. Then the rights holders and the broadcasters will get the data of how that's impacting consumption. So that side of things will be super important, because as people watch through OTT platforms, in many ways, OTT now is, as a product, can potentially be seen as a better product than linear broadcasting, because of the ability to overlay data and gamification and all those other things to it. So that's only going to become more prevalent. It's not for everyone, but for those that do, all the data shows that they absolutely love it, and it massively increases consumption time as a result.
Great. In terms of betting that you also mentioned, is that a threat, or is that an opportunity for sports? There's been a lot of discussion on betting all over the world, in the US, of course, and in Brazil, where I'm from. What are your thoughts on betting in sports?
Yeah, look, I think there's so much money there in that whole betting bubble. Betting has a place for many, and what we've seen, in particularly in the marketplace in the UK, is that betting and gambling organisations have had to massively restrict. There's been legislation, things in place where they've had to restrict the amount of marketing they do and advertising they do in play or during the sports matches themselves to try and reduce the impact that gambling's having on society and the community. And on the other side, you see what's happening in the US, and you see that money's coming from everywhere. This growth of gambling is coming at a rate of knots. It's going to continue to grow over the next 10 years. You won't see that market mature for a long time. But already gambling, even prior to it being legalized, has had a huge impact on society. So the question for me is, how long will the sports industry, particularly in markets like the US, ride the wave of betting to monetize and cash in before they have to start winding things back again to protect consumers? And that'll be a political, I guess, a push that will inevitably come down the line. Big challenges in the US are, once things are legislated, they are done state by state, which means that you can't just change a law nationally and that's going to change everything. So, look, I think betting's role is always one that's debated, but it's not going away anywhere. So I think we do have to accept that it's there, and it's just about getting the commercial model right. So sports can take advantage of the fact that betting's taking advantage of it, and that money's being distributed properly, and that there are measures being put in place to monitor the impact that it has on people, because gambling in many ways is seen as an addiction that people can't have to work through. So yeah, I mean, it's a very tough one to navigate, but betting's not going away. So I think you have to work out how to deal with it rather than put a wall between them and betting and try and do it that way.
Yeah, agree. What about esports? Is that esports one of the big winners of the COVID period?
Well, I think even beforehand, esports was winning in a lot of ways. Like the growth of esports was, in terms of consumption, in terms of money being invested into it, was going nuts, and that hasn't changed. It has been amplified a little bit, but what we started to see in esports prior to the pandemic was, again, moving the esports gaming side of things to the real world, where we were seeing more and more physical events happening and more of that, say, sportifying of the live event, which was working super, super well and was really exciting. And companies like ESL who were rolling out events across the industry. Esports will continue to take prominence. We've seen sponsors running to esports to invest because the engagement levels, again, because of that digital first community it has, is crazy. So it's huge. So brands are able to tap into that, ride the wave of esports, and they're seeing measurable impact to engagement, to consumption of their content, and to their products, depending on what they're selling. So yeah, esports is something that, again, I talked a bit about what competition sports has. I mean, esports is absolutely a huge competitor for them, and I think what you'll see is brands in particular are going, where do we invest? They might invest in both, but they could easily go, we're going to prioritize esports over sports these days.
Yes, 100%. So there's a few more people sort of commenting here. Humberto Moreira, Enio Orantes, Isa Magalhães, shout out to all of you. Thanks for watching. We're actually reaching the end sort of the interview. So if you guys have any question there to shoot to Nick, this is your chance. Nick, since we mentioned COVID and this period, so what were the best practices that you saw made by sports organizations to keep their fans engaged, even when they couldn't play sometimes? So what was the innovation that you saw that was really cool? And what do you think actually of those, what will last once everybody is back to normal, if we get there?
Well, what I think in terms of from a technological standpoint, we saw things like the watch together technology and watch party technology really be rolled out. So what that allowed us to do is to be able to watch the live broadcast with our friends, no matter where they are in the world. And that technology has actually been there for quite a while, but it was because COVID forced everyone's hands. It became a real great opportunity for broadcasters in particular a connective point for fans to get back in touch and connect with friends to watch their favorite sports events. And now we're seeing that just being rolled out across all major broadcasters, from Disney to BT Sport, one of the first to try it out in the sports industry this year with the Bundesliga. Sorry, last year, I should say. And yeah, that's something that's going to continue to be hugely important as a engagement tool and connectivity tool. Also, things that I think were really successful were obviously sports. We talked about esports before, but sports used the gaming titles that were associated with their sports to create leagues and other gaming competitions, which just helped create a bit of a platform and connectivity with fans and alike. And they were really, really successful. So that's something that you wouldn't necessarily expect the same numbers to be delivered all the time. But what it does is it provides another touch point.
Mm-hmm.
These days want to get connected more with the athlete over their own teams. So things like esports allow that, because it's typically the athletes playing those games and talking through their experience. And that's why platforms like Twitch can also play a big role as well. So yeah.
Yeah, cool. Nick, normally now I would just go to this draw of the winner of the PlayStation 5 digital edition for people that replied to our survey. We're doing a super cool study, and we're going to nominate the most attractive employers in sports. We had over 1,000 people replying to our survey, and so we're going to draw now a winner of that PlayStation 5. So normally I would say I'm going to think about a book or a podcast or sort of a TV or YouTube channel that you would like to recommend. Then I go to and draw, and then I would come back to you. I tried to do that twice, and all the time when I come back, I forgot to say, thank you for being here, bye-bye. And they say, are you not going to ask me about the book? I was thinking about it. So I think I'm going to ask you about that before I go to the draw. Do you have a book that you would like to recommend to anyone starting a career in sport?
Well, look, this is a pretty easy cop-out for me, but I do work at a publishing business, and I think my team would be quite upset with me if I didn't prioritize recommending our own magazine that we produce. That's a quarterly publication that people can subscribe to. I do think if you want to learn about the industry, the stuff we're doing across magazine, podcasts, YouTube, the website, social, is as good an education as you can possibly get. Our tagline that we used for many years was "Get inside the industry." And I think for people who are working in the space, if you want to learn, just consume lots of great content. And I am biased, of course, but I would recommend go and check out SportsPro's content and subscribe to that stuff. A lot of the content is for free to access. The magazine, there is a cost involved, but it's well worth your time. So I'm gonna cop out a little bit there and make sure I push SportsPro's message first.
Okay then. Still, I would like you to think about a book. When I come back, I'm going to ask you about that then. Okay. Let me just share my screen here. 1 second. Let's see if this works. It should. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Where is that? Here. I'm using a online software called Random Results. Yes, I think everybody can see that in their screen. So basically what I did, I added loads of names here. So wasn't quite 1,000 because many people replied without giving their names. But anyway, I included everyone that's put their names here. And basically, I'm going to click here and draw now, and that will be the winner. And Manuel Trigo Mateo, you are the lucky winner of a PlayStation 5 digital edition. We will get in touch with you. Congratulations. Yeah, I think this is it. You know, normally there should be a bit more of a...
You needed to add the sound effects there.
But well done. I would like to actually thank everyone that participated. We're going to do a great report on that, and that's the first of many that we're gonna do. And well, this year will be only this one, but we'll hope to improve in the next ones. As I said, we're very happy with the turnout, over 1,000 responses, and yeah, so Manuel, we'll get in touch with you. Now, congratulations, Nick. Before we go, and I want to say hello, Tia Aida in Angra dos Reis, beautiful place, saying hi as well. There's a large contingent from Brazil today. Thanks everyone who's watching on Facebook, LinkedIn, and on our YouTube channel. Nick, before we go, suggest a book to our audience.
Okay, well, I didn't really come prepared for that because I was ready to fly the SportsPro flag, but I mean, a fun book to read, which does give a bit of insight on the impact of what data has, is a book like Moneyball, which is always a cool read. If anyone hasn't read it, it's good. It's been made into a movie, and it gives an insight on what data's role can be, and links back to what I was saying before. Data is the #1 tool that everyone wants to know how to use better, and that storyline is as good as any to paint the picture of how impactful it can be if you can analyze data in a different way to what we do today.
Moneyball, then that will enter our list of recommendations that we have on our website as well. So if anyone wants to check out the other recommendations that we had throughout the episodes, they can go there. Anyway, Nick, any last message that you'd like to leave to our audience?
Oh, no, look, I just want to say thank you for having me. If anyone wants to reach out to me, feel free to do that. You can find me on LinkedIn and on Twitter. Look, I think it's an exciting time to be in the sports industry. A lot of transformation and exciting things happening. So, yeah, really happy to be able to share some of that with you guys, and look forward to catching up again soon, hopefully in a physical event not too far away, Joao.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for being here. We have the link to SportsPro Media in the description of the video. Go there as well if you'd like to attend our Education Virtual Expo, meet some of the best programs in sports management in the world online, have a chat with them. Also, the link in the description. Go there. It's free to attend. I want to say a big thank you to everyone who watched all over the world. And I see you next week. I think next week our show is on Thursday. Then I'm going to interview Sam Momen, great guy with a lot of experience in the sports business as well. Right, Nick. Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks.